And of course, we mustn't forget that you talk about the number of local governments, the land mass. We're not exactly rich in infrastructure.
Absolutely.
And so there are issues around transportation. It's not as if we have functional trains or that our roads are exactly, in the sort of condition that they should be. And so all of this will have a real impact on INEC's ability to move materials around smoothly, not to make excuses for them, but to make the point you're making,
Yeah,
that,
absolutely, that people
that there will be issues,
empathetic.
and that perhaps if we were told, these are the issues we're facing, people will be understanding. But my hope, like every other person, is that we learn from this particular election and that we move on. But in terms of just outside the conduct of the elections, we're now obviously moving towards another phase, and that's the collation phase. What role, if any, do observers play in that particular process, and to sort of try and protect the sanctity of votes that have been cast?
Well, the role of the observer is extremely limited. You are gagged, as far as I'm concerned, you are gagged. There's not a whole lot you can say. You're only to observe, be seen, and not really be heard, and then you make a note of what you've observed, and if you feel you need to send, well, not if you feel, you should send a report. And but I think that collation is critical, and the collation process is critical, and the observers, to the extent that they are permitted, should also be part of the process.
But are they permitted? This is the question, really. Are they allowed to follow election with sheets once they've left the polling units to the collation centers, and to sit through the whole process to make sure that things haven't been changed?
To the best of my knowledge, the information at my disposal is that conceptually we can follow that process and see, because these are not supposed to be backroom processes. It's supposed to be done pretty much in the open, to the best of my knowledge. So, but I cannot tell you that I have actually followed followed them through to the point of collating. But for me, because I had the point you raised previously, which is that it can cast a really, really dark shadow on the process if that particular process is not as transparent as the rest of it. So conceptually, yes, it would appear that observers ought to be able to interrogate the process up to that point, but whether in reality they do or we do is another
Well, you
matter.
don't, clearly, in your
Well,
own
I
case.
particularly have not followed through with the going to
the collation centers.
the collation centers.
Well, Mr. Akwata did make the observation that one thing he has observed about the electoral process is that the people have taken ownership of it. We would like to have your perspective on this, Mr. Bala.
Well, I totally agree with him, but first of all, we need to understand why everything is looking this tense. We're talking about a situation now where Nigerians want to take a decision to hand over their political, social, and economic destiny, right, into the custody of an individual called a leader. And if that is the intention, everything that must follow it must be in consonance with what INEC is planning. But before now, I mean, a lot of us have observed that you just need 3 stakeholders. And if these 3 stakeholders will do what they are supposed to do, then everything will be good.
3 stakeholders, how would you explain that?
The key people that will decide whether this election is going to be transparent and peaceful. And the stakeholders are: 1, the umpire, right? 2nd, the politician. And 3rd, the electorate. If the umpire behaves well, and the electorate behaves well, and the politicians behave well, then at the end of the day, things will be good. By my assessment, the electorate did their best. People went out in their numbers to make sure they vote, and they were ready to vote. We saw it. I mean, some were there under the sun. We saw pregnant women. We saw very old people, and the politicians themselves. So personally, I will give the electorate a pass mark. But it's the same thing we also observed with even the politicians. I can tell you, effective Saturday, the politicians conducted themselves in a civic manner, regardless of the few black spots we noted. We had problems at the end of the day with the third stakeholder, which is the umpire. And the problems we had with the umpire are just two. One, the management of their time. And secondly, the logistics of material. I can tell you that on the management of time, INEC was very, very poor. Because many people went to the polling booths as early as 7:30, hoping to be accredited. But in some places, till probably 10 a.m. to noon, the INEC officials didn't show up. Then on the aspect of material logistics, I mean, you have been analyzing, people have been giving you the information. Surprisingly, many of those polling booths or stations that Nigerians went to, I mean, they didn't see, first of all, the INEC officials didn't come, I mean, at the appropriate time, and beside that, they didn't go with the complete materials. And that was the beginning. Because INEC didn't manage its time properly, you know, there was a delay, and during that delay, there was anxiety. And it unnecessarily created apathy in Nigerians. And because of that, we have seen what that delay and lack of material has snowballed to now. Because in some places, I mean, I can remember somebody being interviewed on the radio by name Barrister Amonde Ubani. He had to volunteer his generator. But even after that, some people discovered that the ballot papers were not even there. In places where there were ballot papers, the result sheets were not also there.
So I'm trying to understand the conclusion you're therefore trying to reach. Is it your view that this has had a huge impact on the conduct of the elections?
100% correct.
Well, I think you're wrong. The numbers don't show that. The numbers show that about 300 polling units were so affected that elections had to be done today. That's 0.25% of polling booths across Nigeria.
No. I think we need to understand the difference between the number of polling booths that had issues and probably the election was moved to the following day. That one is a different aspect. But what we are saying is this: if INEC had arrived as early as probably 7 or 8 o'clock, right, there wouldn't have been a need for people to get so excited or to start getting agitated.
And nobody is suggesting that the elections were 100%. And I mean, I voted in a polling place where INEC didn't get there till 11:15. So it did affect the time that we spent
and probably
voting.
You had the patience.
But the issue is whether this had a material impact on the overall outcome of the election process. And I am suggesting to you that the answer is no.
But I want to tell you that the answer is yes.
Well, because people got anxious. They still voted.
People did vote, yes.
Many at the end of the day didn't vote.
Many did not vote.
Many didn't vote.
When we say
the
many,
management of time by INEC was very, very poor.
Well, the numbers
We're not
I am
talking
seeing
now
in
about
terms of turnout and in terms of the people who voted are actually quite high vis-a-vis the numbers we've had in previous elections.
That is an improvement. But at the end of the day, that poor management of time and the non-availability of materials had a material impact.
Yeah,
Okay.
the issue of...
in the case where there is, and this is hypothetical, in the case where there is, to buttress or not either of your points, in the case where there is too close to call the number of voters for each different political party and there's a runoff, does it not matter then that everybody that could have voted?
You're agreeing with him.
Doesn't matter that anybody.
I am saying to you that first of all, I'd like to see what the exact numbers of voter turnout is. That's the starting point vis-a-vis the registered voters. Because traditionally, not everybody who registers to vote actually comes out to vote.
Can I make
Let me just finish. And so the task really is to say, what is the normal, because there's normally like, if you like, an average. Because not every, it's as we sit here, there are people who have not collected their permanent voter cards. Yes. Not because, because they've decided they don't want to vote. So you do have, it's a civic responsibility. Not everybody chooses to exercise it. There are people
especially since it's not enforceable anyway.
Yeah, exactly. There are people who do register to vote but don't vote. And this is across the world. It's not peculiar to this country. People register to vote, or people who could vote don't go out to vote. What I'll be interested in looking at are the statistics around how many people did come out to vote. What is the sort of reference point in terms of globally? How does that compare? If you say vis-a-vis the numbers of people who would normally come out to vote, is it 10%? Is it 20%? Is it half? 50%? And those are then my difficulty in having conversations without facts is
and
that
figures.
we're liable, to be sentimental and to talk about things that we cannot really locate in real things.
I really am anxious. I really am anxious to